Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the BRoto Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Tim Petrop, here with the only two twins that are giving you the nominee for the BRoto Fantasy Football Awards 2018.
Award show, baby.
Yes, the nomination special. We have our special guest, Andy Singleton, today. We also have a special guest, the winner of the BRoto Fantasy League, Mr. Fun Guy himself, John. So we're going to have him on the show as well. But first, to get into his nominations, without further ado, let's get started. Guys, I don't know about you, but my life is incomplete without fantasy football.
How many times have you opened up Yahoo Fantasy app just to see that there's nothing?
So many times.
Nothing to do.
Crazy, it's unbelievable amount of times.
I just stare at it on my home screen sometimes. Like, I want to press you.
I scroll through the players.
Yeah.
See who's top ranked and such.
It's so funny. But anyway, we're looking back now at what was a great year, and we're giving out some awards. It's kind of hard to believe it's already over. I feel like it was just yesterday that we were doing the preview show and giving out our rankings. So let's get started. We have 10 awards, and these 10 awards are going to be given out to it's different types of awards. We got MVP, most valuable player, which means someone who is valuable, not just the person who scores the most, but who's the most valuable.
Me and Jason found it hilarious when we were like 10. We used to say most valuable poop. When we were like 10 years old, and we thought it was like the funniest thing of all time.
You guys are so funny. Most improved player, rookie of the year, offensive player of the year, bust of the year, way too early steal of the year, which is like someone that you're already looking forward to drafting underneath where he's valued next year. Yep. The pull your hair out player who is just wildly inconsistent. The Robert Ory Award, which is the player that only shows up in crunch time.
Hashtag Robert Ory.
No other time. The Shakespearean Tragedy, which is a player that got injured but is now going to make us cry because we think back and we think, hey, this guy could have been great. Hey. But he wasn't. And finally, we have the waiver rider. Shout out to the waiver wave. The best waiver pickup after week 6 in the fantasy football season. Are you guys excited for this, baby?
This is one of the best shows of the year, man.
Not as excited as
the award show.
It's the fantasy award nomination, baby.
Because Tim is hyped up on some tea right now.
Oh, yeah. Once Timmy gets some tea in his system, the whole day changes.
Please make fun of him for this. We do it enough in person. He needs some Twitter hate for this.
I mean, I don't drink caffeine.
His caffeine is tea. He drinks tea and acts like he's hyper.
Imagine
I don't believe
Timmy,
it. It's all an act.
Drank coffee every once in a while. Take a shot of espresso, see what happens.
Yo, I was the best teacher in the world today because I had a big thing of tea.
It's an act.
There's caffeine in tea.
It's a placebo.
Maybe. I mean, it works.
It works.
Either way. I'll take it. So we're going to get started on these awards, but before we do that, we want to tell you guys a little bit about a contest we're running. So these awards are only nominations, and one thing that we're going to do is we're going to put this video on YouTube. Shout out to the YouTubers out there. We're going to put this on Instagram. Shout out to the Instagrammers out there. And we're going to put this on Twitter. Shout out to the Twitter people out there. And we are going to vote. And the people who vote the most and give us the winner, those are going to be the winners. We're going to do that next week on our awards show special.
Also next week, we're going to be going over all the bets that we made throughout the year.
Yes, so we're going to go over that, but also the awards show special next week. And in order to have your first crack at getting into a fantasy football league with us next season, if you go on Twitter and vote, plus you go on Instagram and vote, plus you go on YouTube and vote, and you are following us on all 3 of those platforms, you will be automatically entered to be in a fantasy league with us next year.
There you go.
The YouTube video should be up by Sunday. The Instagram clips will be coming, so you're going to have to keep checking the Instagram clips and vote on each one of them. And on Twitter, the polls will come, so set up those notifications for BRoto Fantasy.
To make it clear, Twitter is going to be polls. We'll probably just have those constantly open for the week, something of that sort. Instagram, we're gonna post short clips, and then you're gonna comment your choice. Correct?
And we're also going to put some story.
There's polls on Instagram now, bro.
But there's only 2
options.
options.
And then on YouTube, you're gonna have to comment your choices.
Yes, you're gonna comment your choices.
Just gotta make it clear.
And give us your @ so we know exactly who you are. So it's time. Let's get right into this, baby. The first award, let's start right off the bat, is the MVP.
The most valuable poop, baby.
Volatile player.
The most valuable player of the year. Let's start with Michael. Michael, who is your MVP?
Folks, my most valuable player on the year is the one and only James Conner.
Boo.
Listen, How you booing? I didn't even
Yeah,
say
my
anything about him
MVP.
yet.
Definitely not. Definitely
Where
not
was
doing
James
that.
Conner drafted ADP wise? Either in the double-digit rounds or he was
Listen.
picked up before the season started, depending when the draft was taking place, right? Since then, he put up over 1,500 rushing yards and had 13 touchdowns. He ended as the overall running back 6 despite missing the last 3 games of the season. Basically just stepped into Le'Veon Bell's role and completely took over. Whoever picked him up or whoever drafted him in the late rounds, I did in one of my leagues, well, multiple leagues, got an RB1 for the whole season. So James Conner is my MVP.
So James Conner is our first MVP candidate. Jason, who is your most valuable player?
Just talking shit off the bat,
I'm not
man. I
gonna
don't
lie,
like
James
it.
Conner's a good choice, but I'm gonna act like it's a piece of shit choice because it's a competition we're having here. All right,
Fair.
So someone who doesn't step foot on the field during the playoffs is not my MVP. I'm sorry. You know who my MVP
That's a
is?
good point.
The love of my life, George Kittle. Kittle me this. Only 5 tight ends were ranked within the top 130 players this season. So basically having one of those guys was huge. Now, when we're talking about that, we're also talking about Ebron and Cook, who were finished within the top 130. But there were really 3 big tight ends. Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle. Kittle was the only one that was either drafted super late in the draft or undrafted altogether. And he did it with 3 different quarterbacks. So you see these quarterbacks go down and you think that there's going to be an issue and you think that this player might not be as good as he was, but he just kept continuing to improve with the next backup that was called upon. So when you have that positional value, putting up those numbers, setting the record for yards for a tight end with Garoppolo, Beathard, and Nick Mullins, Kittle's my MVP.
It's a good pick. Just so you guys know, for those of you saying, how did they not say Patrick Mahomes yet? Patrick Mahomes is going to get his own award. Patrick Mahomes is getting the Fantasy Monster Stud Glorious Almighty Player of the Year. Patrick Mahomes scored the most fantasy points in the history of fantasy football.
First year as a starter.
Ever.
Unbelievable.
Ever. So think about all the fantasy years. He had the best one. So he's not eligible for any of these awards. So Patrick Mahomes, you win the ultimate prize of you are the fantasy beast of the year. Now, with that being said, my fantasy MVP is clear to me. It's Davante Adams. Davante Adams was the poster boy for consistency this year. He finished as the wide receiver 3 on the season, 111 receptions, 1,386 yards, 13 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion, just for good measure. His ADP was late second round and early third round. It's worth 2 points.
He really just threw in 2-point conversions.
That's
You
right.
can go over 2-point conversions for every player.
Well, or
James Conner, I'm sure he had multiple 2-point conversions.
oh, you're sure, but you're not sure because you didn't say it so hot.
Here's my issue with your choice.
Hold on, I'm not done saying it. He finishes a wide receiver 2 or better every single week of the season except week 4, where he finished just outside of wide receiver 2. He finishes a wide receiver 1 every single week in the playoffs. He never scored a single digit in half-point PPR. He never scored under 12 points ever in the entire year. He was the model of consistency, and he always produced. By the way, this is
2-point conversions for James Conner.
Oh, that's what you was doing.
so you're so whack.
Tim, no, it's a good choice.
So your choices, because you know
His ADP was too high.
I'm
His
going to have to
ADP
agree
was-
with you, man.
For him to
He
win
was a
MVP,
late
it's
second-round
high.
pick.
guys,
Easily.
do you know who he finished over?
Well, yeah, obviously.
He was a late second round pick. So think about Devonta Adams.
Listen,
if
the
you're
MVP, if we're not taking ADP, and the MVP, if we're not taking ADP to account, is Mr. Todd Gurley.
no, Todd Gurley is not the MVP because he was
That's
drafted
true.
number 1 overall.
That's the point I'm
And he's
making.
better
But
than
here's the
Devontae
thing.
Adams.
Here's why Devonta Adams is the MVP. Because there is a good chance that you got Devonta Adams and got Todd Gurley. That if you drafted a guy like David Johnson, Devontae Adams saved your season, like me. If you drafted Saquon Barkley, you got Devontae Adams. You could have, in theory, drafted like on the first go around Todd Gurley and then got like Gronk or Michael Thomas and then got him and he's your wide receiver 2. Look, if you're being drafted in the second, third round, you finish as the 3rd overall wide receiver and you finish over guys like Antonio Brown. DeAndre Hopkins is the only guy who got drafted over him that beat him. Literally name any other player that got drafted over him and he
Julio
finished
Jones.
in front of them. He finished in front of Julio Jones.
I don't know if that's true.
That is true.
I think he did.
So it's look.
Not most valuable.
Anyway, it's up to you guys, all right? We're going to have Andy Singleton on to talk about this a little bit more as well. Let's move on to the most improved
MIP.
Yeah, MIP. Who is the
This
most
show isn't improved.
Who is the most improved player? Jason, let's start with you this time.
Oh, goody. I'm going to go with the 7th round pick, the 31st overall pick in the 7th round from a few years back. I'm talking about Mr. Chris Carson. Ended the season as a running back 15, basically the model running back 2 all season. After week 11, he did not have less than 12 points, so he was there for you the entire end of the season and playoffs. Even before that, once he started getting the rock after week 3, he was as reliable as they come. Basically, you put him in your lineup, you didn't have to worry. You knew you were getting at least 10 points most of the season. And when you're drafting someone pretty late and someone who's never really done it before, who improved a lot, Chris Carson is my most improved player.
It's a solid choice.
I'm going to go second on this one.
Not the correct choice.
My most improved player is actually a player that got less targets than he got last year. Michael Thomas is my most improved player. So what is improvement, right? What does that mean? What does that mean? Improve means you do better in your opportunities, right? Michael Thomas finishes the wide receiver 6 this season. He was actually targeted 2 less times than he was last season. Despite the fact that he was targeted 2 less times, he increases receptions by 21. He increases yardage by over 160 yards. He scored 4 more touchdowns than last year. And get this, he increased his fantasy output by 100 points over last season. That is with 2 less receptions than last season. If you're talking about improvement, the definition of improvement is how did you improve in your opportunities? Michael Thomas took his game from mid-level wide receiver, low-level wide receiver 1 to high-level wide receiver 1 with 100 more points with 2 less chances. Michael Thomas is my most improved
Tim,
player.
that's all great and dandy, sure. But everyone knows Michael Thomas is a stud. He was drafted late first round, early second round.
Michael, if you're gonna go back and revisit some bets, I think I made a nice bet with you about Michael Thomas would be.
There's no way. I loved Michael Thomas. What are you talking about?
You guys called me crazy for putting Michael Thomas in front of Antonio Brown in the rankings.
No. Oh, you did?
In front of Antonio Brown. He didn't in front of Antonio Brown.
Jones
But
too, I think. I don't
yeah,
know
that's who it was. I think it was Julio Jones.
I had him as the number 1 wide receiver this season.
Yeah, that
mean,
didn't
it
happen.
worked,
But yeah.
When you preface your sentence with a low wide receiver 1 last year, then that's it. Most improved is out the window.
All right, I hear you, but at the same time, listen to this: 2 less targets, 100 more half PPR fantasy points. That's improvement. Jason, Michael, who do you got?
I have the actual most improved player, folks. The man I love. The man I drafted everywhere. The man I told everyone to draft. My MVP, my most improved player, Robert Woods. Guys, Robert Woods did not surpass 800 yards in any of his first 5 seasons in the NFL. Never surpassed 5 touchdowns in any of those seasons. Was a middling wide receiver on the Bills that no one thought anything of. Went to Sean McVay and changed his life forever. And now this year he had 1,219 yards and 6 touchdowns through the air. And icing on the cake, 150 rushing yards and a touchdown as well. Over 1,350 all-purpose yards and 7 touchdowns from a 7th to 8th round pick in Robert Woods.
If I'm gonna admit defeat to one topic, I think I'd be willing to put my vote out for Robert Woods, even though Chris Carson's still my vote, but Robert Woods is right there. Well, Woods is a good selection for this category.
Ridiculous.
A lot better than Michael Thomas.
Thank you.
My question is, why did you Michael emphasize the 19 instead of the 1,200? Like that was the big deal. Robert Woods had 1,219 yards.
1,219 yards.
It's like the 1,200 is the big deal, bro.
Anyway, let's move on to our Rookie of the Year. A lot of nice rookies came out this year and a lot of big impact rookies. This is going to be our hardest topic, I think. Michael, why don't you start this time with Rookie of the Year?
I don't know if this is going to be the hardest topic. I think there's one that stands above the rest. Clearly, I don't think we even need to say his name.
I'm going to
Saquon Barkley, but
yeah.
My Rookie of the Year, though, since everyone can't select Saquon Barkley, is Phillip Lindsay. How about let's show an undrafted rookie some loves, folks. All right, out of Colorado State, I believe it was, right? Or I always got Colorado and Colorado State confused. One of those schools. Undrafted rookie comes in front, behind an early down back in Royce Freeman, an early drafted running back, and takes the job from him. Rushes for over 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns on the year. How could you not love Philip Lindsay and love his story and just everything about Philip Lindsay?
Philip Lindsay is a guy that I definitely want to root for. I feel like he's one of those guys that's just like, if you're not rooting for Philip Lindsay, then you're just a dick. Or you're Royce Freeman. My guy Saquon Barkley, I took the easy way out here. I mean, guys, 294 fantasy points, 1,300 yards, and 11 touchdowns on the ground. Did even more in the air. Let's see, where are these stats? I lost almost on 721 yards on 91 receptions. Hot damn is right. 4 touchdowns to add to the 11 touchdowns. That is a total of 2,028 yards from scrimmage, 5.8 yards per touch, 15 touchdowns he was responsible for. I don't have to tell you. If you're a Saquon Barkley owner, you know exactly what Saquon Barkley did for you. He should be in the conversation for fantasy MVP because he was probably being drafted in the back end of the first round and gave you value greater than guys like Le'Veon Bell or Ezekiel Elliott or David Johnson. Like he outperformed all these guys, and he did it with an offense that really didn't move the ball. Imagine next year if they get themselves a quarterback, if they get Derek Carr in there or
don't say get yourself a quarterback, then say Derek Carr, please.
That's true. Dwayne Haskins or someone that could actually throw the ball. You know what I'm saying? So it's going to be 352 touches. This guy was out of this world. So rookie of the year, Saquon Barkley. Jason, which loser are you putting up?
All right. I think I've made kind of a good case for Nick Chubb here. Nick Chubb is my person here. I'm going with the value side of it. Saquon Barkley was a first-round pick. You had to waste a first-round pick on him.
I mean, if we're going value, though, Philip Lindsay was undrafted in fantasy leagues.
So was Nick Chubb in a lot of leagues.
And played the whole season.
So was Nick Chubb in a lot of leagues. Fine.
Played
so
the whole
you're
season.
just fighting against Barkley here.
I'm fighting for Lindsay.
Fighting against Barkley. My point being, Nick Chubb was a running back one ever since he took over his job. He only had one game below double-digit points after week 7. It's pretty much as simple as that. Once Freddie Kitchens took over in Cleveland, Nick Chubb became the every down back, catching, rushing. He was reliable in every single format. So if I'm looking at draft capital, what it took to get this guy, the numbers that he put up, his numbers were almost as comparable to Barkley's at some point in this season.
Yeah, I agree. So there you go. Offensive rookie of the year. I'm telling you, that's a harder... it's harder than it looks. All right, so let's go over to Offensive Player of the Year. The Offensive Player of the Year. Yeah. We have... Michael and Jason's faces are just like... If you guys go to the YouTube so you can see the look of disgust on their face. The absolute look of disgust. So, so let's talk about the Offensive Player of the Year. My Offensive Player of the Year, I'm going to start because, fuck you guys, is Christian McCaffrey, Jason's boy. Came through and went way over Jason's predicted 3 touchdowns with 13 touchdowns.
You know what's funny?
I got in on that bet too, I believe.
He didn't have any before Cam Newton got hurt.
So not any? What are you talking about?
He had 2 before Cam Newton got hurt.
All right, you've had enough time with your slander. Let me give some love. Christian McCaffrey, almost 2,000 yards from scrimmage, 1,965 yards. Do you know, at the beginning when I started compiling these stats, I started compiling them with the totals from the last 2 years. And I'm like, Christian McCaffrey had 3,051 yards from scrimmage? What the fuck? But anyway.
That would be something else.
That would be something. But 13 touchdowns total, 1,965 yards from scrimmage. He with 867 yards receiving and 6 touchdowns, he would have came in as a starting wide receiver on your fantasy squad. So you had a starting running back and a starting wide receiver. A lot of people thought that he couldn't rush. They knew that the passing numbers were coming, but I think 219 rushes for 1,098 yards and 7 touchdowns is something that you couldn't have expected out of Christian McCaffrey coming into the season. So Christian McCaffrey is my Offensive Player of the Year. Michael, who's your Offensive Player of the Year?
I'm kind of going with the Jason Robert Woods thing here, how he said if I had to vote for someone other than my guy, it'd probably be here for Christian McCaffrey.
Come on.
For the oh boy. But oh boy, folks.
For the oh boy.
I'm going Matty Ice.
Oh, my lordy.
Just to really squeeze Timmy and Jason by the nutsack here.
This is like the Jason hate show right now.
Guys, Matty Ice ended as the number 2 overall fantasy player, as much as you want to hate. 361.5 fantasy points. This dude ended with 35 touchdowns, just under 5,000 passing yards, only 7 interceptions, and 3 rushing touchdowns. Had 20 points or more 9 of 16 weeks. He was super consistent. He was putting up monster numbers week in and week out. And despite all the hate you guys give him, he absolutely killed it in fantasy all year.
And now his offensive coordinator.
And he was drafted as a low-end QB1, QB2.
I'm just gonna say
His offensive coordinator getting fired doesn't mean he didn't produce fancy MVP
I'm
numbers.
looking at next season. He's a sell for me.
Well, sure. That happened the year before that, too, in fantasy.
So enough with the pleasantries already. Fantasy football is about, yes, we love to spread the love to players that are great.
Love.
But even more than that, we need to spread the hate
Love
to the
will
people
keep us
who
together.
killed us and cost us not only pride, but let's be real, people, money.
Cash moolah,
Moolah,
baby.
baby.
Cash moolah. This game would not be nearly as popular if we weren't playing for straight up bucks. And this guy
And
cost
pride.
people straight up bucks. Let's go to the three people, that were the worst. Jason, who's your biggest bust of the year?
You know what's funny? When you look at a player's numbers and you see 12 points, you're like, oh, they actually were productive that one game. So with that being said, Royce Freeman is my bust of the year. I think that not someone we were very fond of going into the season. He was jumping into like high third round ADP at some point, and something I wanted to stay away from personally. And then once he gets onto the field, 4th round pick that people just feel like is going to have the job because, 4th round picks are handed everything nowadays. Sarcasm. Relatively healthy all season, and he gets outplayed.
Sarcasm.
Hashtag.
I don't know. Philip Lindsay, UDFA. Undrafted free agent, just jumps in front of him on the depth chart, outplays him all season. And it's not like there was injury to blame. He was just outplayed. If you look at his health, he was relatively healthy. I don't think injury had much to do with it, even though it has a lot to do with busts. The big thing too, he was not involved in the passing game at all. If you look at his numbers he had 20 targets on the season, 14 catches, 72 yards. He was not involved in the pass game at all. If you're going to be a part-time player and want to be at least a little bit productive in fantasy, you got to catch the ball a little bit.
So here's what I'll say. Yes, he was a bust, and it's a good candidate.
Definitely a bust.
But his role was predictably a good role. And if you're getting out-snapped and out-touched by a guy who made the Pro Bowl, like it's not like the worst thing. Yes, he has
I'm not following this argument here.
What's going on?
The role of starting running back for the Denver Broncos.
But the point is, you were drafting him as that,
right? Because
and
no
he
one
wasn't.
knew.
And he never had the role.
It's because no one knew who Philip Lindsay was.
So
What do you mean? So
people thought Royce Freeman was better than he was.
But the role of rookie running back in the backfield for the Broncos ended up being an extremely productive one. And I think that's what people...
That hurts his case even more then, because he couldn't get the job.
But I think that's what people were drafting Royce Freeman for, and then all of a sudden... Right, Philip Lindsay came through, and yes, he did lose the job, but I'm just saying it's not a big deal to lose a job to Philip Lindsay as much as you're making it. The dude made the fucking Pro Bowl.
How is his replacement was great an argument for Royce Freeman?
It makes him a bust, dude. Yeah, he just didn't get the job done. What are you talking about? We're talking about busts. A bust. You drafted him in the 3rd or 4th round.
It would be worse if Lindsay was bad.
I'm not saying he wasn't a bust. It's a good play. I'm just saying like he's not the biggest bust because his role, the reason why you drafted him, ended up being a good role. So yes, you drafted the wrong player.
I'm with Jason. If anything,
but
that
the role
makes it hurt more.
I don't know how.
Because he lost his job to an undrafted free agent.
But he lost his job to a Pro Bowler. So you want to put labels on people? Fine. Because he's also a Pro Bowler. So what was good? No. Let's move on to my bust of the year.
Really
this is clearly the bust of the year. I'm sorry. And me and Michael, I mean, you should agree with me because we both drafted this guy in different leagues. And he busted for both of us. It's Rob Gronkowski. Like, easily the bust of the year.
Yuck.
Came into the year as the consensus #1 pick at tight end. His ADP was the late second round. If he had finished behind Kelsey and Ertz, you'd be like, all right. Even Kittle, because he went and set records, you'd be like, all right, fine. I'll take him, 4th guy. But he finished behind guys like Jared Cook, Austin Hooper, Eric Ebron. Now, those are 3 guys that had good seasons, right? So you're like, all right, even if he goes behind them, he had a couple injuries, then I understand. But he even finished behind Trey Burton, Kyle Rudolph, don't pronounce the L,
Blah.
David Njoku, Vance McDonald. He only had 5 more points than Evan Ingram and OJ Howard. Guys that missed a majority of the year.
I love OJ Howard, man.
He is the worst. And honestly, if you looked at the Patriots, you're like, this guy Gronk might set the record for touchdowns this season. And he did so the opposite. He was not reliable at all whatsoever. He put up in the in the championship week, he put up a big, fat donut. And that's only if you made it there because he put 3.1 up in the semis. Rob Gronkowski is the biggest fantasy bust in fantasy this season.
It's a solid one. I'll give you that. Mine might beat him, though. I could have patted myself on the back again, hashtag Robert Woods, and went Ronald Jones here. Someone I yelled from the rooftops not to draft. But by the time it was like Labor Day weekend where most drafts were taking place, he was more of a double-digit round guy anyways.
Yeah, he was more of a
But this dude's going 4th and 5th round.
guy.
Midsummer's dream.
Yeah. Guys, you know
Foreshadow
what?
Shakespeare.
We're gonna give our tips throughout the year of how to have your best leagues. That was so twin of you just now. YouTube.com if you want to see what they did, their twin ass ways. But what was I saying?
I don't know.
Yeah, don't have your draft before week 4 of the preseason. I mean, week 3 of the preseason at least. Like if you're doing it
some
before
guys
then,
like doing it beforehand. But
I don't like it.
to each his own.
Yeah.
My bust of the year is Leonard Fournette. This is another guy that I guess I am going to pat myself on the back because we all begged everyone not to draft Leonard Fournette.
We did.
Not only is he super volume dependent, he's always hurt. He was on not a bad team. He was on a bad offense. We expected the Jaguars to be better overall, but mostly led by their defense. And this is a guy who not only did he get hurt, his injuries weren't season-ending injuries, so you had to roster him, which made it that much worse. Because you had to keep him at the end of your bench no matter what the whole season. And even when he did come back, he would have bad games half healthy, and then he'd just be out another 2 games, and then you'd have to sit him again. He rushed for less than 500 yards on the year. I mean, Leonard Fournette all the way, no matter what way you look at it, he was a huge bust everywhere you drafted him. Even at the end of the year, if you played him in the semifinals, he lost second half touches to some no-name running back who it was apparently game planning to get Jackson the ball more. It was a mess for anyone who rostered Leonard Fournette this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue about Leonard Fournette. So those are 3 guys that definitely busted your teams. Hopefully you made the playoffs. I know that I made the playoffs in the league that I drafted Gronk.
As did I.
One of the reasons why I made the playoffs was because of this guy where I'm about to talk about. The pull your hair out. Oh, I skipped one. The way too early steal of next season is the next one. Actually, forget about everything I just said before that. This one is a player that we're already looking forward to drafting higher this next season than most people are looking for because we know that his value will be a lot better. So, with that being said, let's start with Michalimu.
Yes.
Michael, who is your way too early steal for next season?
Baby Sam, folks. If you hear me talking about Baby Sam, that's Baby Sam. Oh, you got to watch a video to know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah, we got Baby Sam.
It's Baby Sam and Robbie Anderson. I'm going with a stack for this one. I'm going a little different here. Not one player, but 2. We've seen the second-year jumps from rookie quarterbacks with Mitch Trubisky and Jared Goff. Fantasy-wise, I still think Mitch Trubisky's trash.
Pat Mahomes.
But Pat Mahomes, yeah. Well, he didn't really play his rookie year, but yeah, second-year quarterback who really took a big jump. Blake Bortles even did it with A-Rob and Allen Hurns. And now we got Sam Darnold and Robbie Anderson. Sam Darnold ended the fantasy season 3 games, 6 touchdowns, and 1 into against some top-notch defenses, and Robbie Anderson was the main beneficiary, going for over 300 total yards and a touchdown in each of those games. We saw Sam Darnold really growing as a quarterback, was a top half PFF-rated quarterback the second half of the year after the injury, and he's played very well of late, and Robbie Anderson has really taken a step up, as people expected when they were drafting him early in the year. If you held on to him all that time, lucky you, because he really pulled through for the playoffs. I think Darnold and Anderson are going to be 2 steals next year in fantasy drafts.
I can get behind Robbie Anderson. I don't know if Darnold's going to be.
Even if he's a low-end QB1, he'd technically be a steal because you're drafting
I
him.
can see him as a streamer next season.
In the last round.
It might depend on who the Jets get, though. If they get Todd Monken from Tampa Bay, then I'll change my title.
I'm hoping they get the guy from Kansas City, man.
Their offensive coordinator? I want Todd Monken.
I really want Kansas City's guy. I want someone off.
He doesn't call
the
plays,
Andy
though.
Reid tree has been solid.
I want someone off the Reid tree.
That's a gripe at him right now that he's not calling the plays.
Well,
Andy Reid calls the
well,
plays.
look, he's the coach though. And a lot of players say he's one of the best coaches they ever played for. So he would be the head coach. So if he brought an offensive mind from that tree as well, he would be the one calling plays.
And he knows how to use his talented players correctly.
Eric Bieniemy. Bieniemy.
Bieniemy. We're gonna learn his name real soon.
Yeah.
So my guy's DJ Moore.
Boring.
What?
Sounds a little bit like this season.
DJ Moore stepped up in the second half of the year, but he was inconsistent. But he ended up with 788 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is better than the average rookie wide receiver. Remember, rookie wide receivers are not usually productive in their first years. The reason why I love him next year is the role is opening up. Like Curtis Samuel took a big role, but he's more of a trick play kind of guy. DJ Moore is more of a traditional route running, field stretching number one, kind of in the Steve Smith vein. That number one, Devin Funchess is almost guaranteed not to come back. And this guy right here, Cam Newton, his arm, when it comes back and he's able to throw to his receivers, when he's able to throw downfield again, DJ Moore is going to be one of the most improved players next season and one of the best fantasy values
Cam
next
Newton
season.
had to start talking.
You can't be
about
knocking
DJ
over Baby Sam, bro. Come on.
You didn't see Cam Newton.
I should have
talking about
known
DJ
that when
Moore?
we put toys on the table that you guys wouldn't be able to.
Cam Newton
hold
wanted to
yourselves
talk
back.
a little about DJ Moore.
That's so stupid. YouTube.com, by the way, /Broto Fantasy to check out this on video. Also, Instagram.com /Broto Fantasy or @Broto Fantasy, however the kids are saying it these days. And Twitter @Broto Fantasy. Michael, who is your way too early steal for next season?
Well, way too early steal for next season is
You already went over this.
Robbie Anderson and Sam Darnold.
Oh, that's right. Jason, who is you guys? I don't know. If
I
you
was
guys,
so confused. I was like, Tim, I already said Anderson and Darnold.
well, guys, I don't know if you know this, but you look alike. I don't know if anyone ever told you
has a
that.
lot to do with it,
You guys
yeah.
are like cousins or something.
I was going to go pick up Baby Sam again, but Jason stopped me.
Go ahead,
All right. It wouldn't be a looking into next season talk from Jason if it didn't include true throw value. So I'm bringing that in because my guy is Dante Pettis. If you look at what he did at the end of the season, and you look at the 49ers quarterbacks, the league average true throw value this season was .442. CJ Beathard was .434, so he just was underneath the league average. Nick Mullins was .468, pretty solidly above league average. And then Jimmy Garoppolo was at .537. That would have put him as the number 7 quarterback next year. So I'm still buying into the Jimmy Garoppolo hype. If anything, what I just said is proof that the Kyle Shanahan system works for quarterbacks. Even CJ Beathard, the worst one, was just slightly below league average. So I think that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to come out and do even better than Nick Mullins did this season. And with that comes greater target value. Dante Pettis at the last 4 weeks of the season was 38th in true target value, and he put up wide receiver 1-2 numbers. So he exceeded his value based on the targets he was seeing from Nick Mullins. If you take Jimmy Garoppolo's true target value, true throw value, and apply that instead to Dante Pettis, he comes in at 26. So that's 12 spots up in true target value. That's a whole wide receiver rank right there. So I think that Dante Pettis is looking like a legit wide receiver 2 next season.
Now, if I had hair to pull out, I would pull out my hair for Sony Michel. Because this guy was wildly inconsistent. Now, he gave the illusion of consistency because his touches were consistent. Never had less than 14 touches from November 25th on, 13 touches. Only had less than 10 touches two times after week 2. So this is the guy who got the touches. The only problem is the production wasn't there all the time. He had 6 touchdowns. 4 of those touchdowns were bunched up in a 3-week span between September 30th and October 14th against Miami, Indianapolis, and Kansas City, where he scored 4 of his 6 touchdowns. After those 3 huge games where everyone was looking at him as a running back 1, he got hurt. Only had 22 yards, and then followed that up with 31 yards, both hurt. He came back, 133 yards and a touchdown, so he bounces back, but he follows that up with 3 straight performances of 7 or less fantasy points without a target or a reception. Then he comes back, and he does great, 116 for 1 in the semis. You're like, yes, I can start this guy again, and then the championship, 5 points. His up and down was just too much for me. As a Sony Michel owner across all of my teams, I drafted him in every single 7th or 8th round that I had. I rode that train and up and down, up and down, up and down all season, and it was a train that in the end cost me.
I tried to warn you guys. After everyone was
good
saying
at
he
points.
was an RB1, I tried warning you guys, though. He was touchdown dependent.
For the area where he was being drafted, I think he met his production value.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you look at him overall this season, 931 yards and 6 touchdowns, you're taking that out of a 7th, 8th round pick. But it's not what you expect for someone who touched the ball an average of 15 times a game.
I mean, I got Robert Woods over there, but I'm real sorry.
Right. So the role was there, the production was not. I'm looking forward to Sony Michel next season, though. I think he's going to have a big year. I think that second year in that system, and hopefully Rex Burkhead's not in the picture anymore, I think that he's going to have a big year. Let's go on to our next one. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. The Robert Ory Award.
Dude.
What?
You literally said
Neither of us picked our inconsistent player.
We didn't?
You didn't announce the Pull Your Hair Out Award. You just started talking about Sony Michel.
Oh. Okay, so the Pull Your Hair Out Award is someone who's wildly inconsistent. If you haven't noticed
Tim.
yet.
Tim just won it.
All right. Jason, who's your pull your hair out player?
Pull out.
Good thing they didn't pull out because he's alive now. Michael Thomas.
That's the worst joke I've ever heard.
I know, but
Sex.
makes babies. 6 games below 11 points this year. Listen, if we're talking about a set and forget wide receiver 1, which Michael Thomas you think he is, 6 out of his 16 games are 11 points or less. That's inconsistent. 3 of those games below 7. And then he had 4 games, 23 or more. He was literally a roller coaster. And when you think about Michael Thomas, you think consistency. You don't think roller coaster. And it had a lot to do with the Saints offense in general.
Yeah.
And then in the playoffs, Michael Thomas was not reliable. In the fantasy playoffs, he wasn't great. So I think that Michael Thomas is an easy answer here.
Michael?
See, I could agree with you here, except I have the less productive, same exact player in Stephon Diggs. Stephon Diggs did regular old Stephon Diggs things, which is why I preferred Adam Thielen prior to the season. He had 5 games with 16 or more points, so very solid, and then 5 games with single-digit points. So, I mean, you were either, and then the 6 other games were in between there. So, this guy, he was super boom bust, but his boom was never really that high except for 2 weeks. And his bust happened more often than you'd like in a very frustrating offense. So, Stephon Diggs, he was drafted as a wide receiver 1. He ended as, I think, wide receiver 12 or 13 or something.
He was drafted if you drafted him as your wide receiver 1, you're not setting yourself up for success.
Well, that's where he was being drafted. His ADP was like a top 12 receiver. Yeah. I mean, he ended right on the cusp of that, but he did it with peaks and valleys that you don't really want from your top end guy.
Ain't no valley low enough.
So let's move on to our next category,
There
the
you
one
go.
that we're supposed to move on to before, the Robert Ory Award.
Ew.
And Robert Ory, for those of you who are old like me, you remember that all he did was hit clutch shots in the playoffs. He was completely a non-factor in the regular season, and then all of a sudden the playoff time would happen, he would hit championship shots year after year after year. He actually has 8 rings because every time he played in the finals with the Lakers. And the Rockets. He was on the Rockets for a couple of those finals. So Robert Ory Award is someone who was mediocre or bad, but then killed it during the fantasy playoffs. Jason, who is your mediocre player of the year?
I'm not going Baby Sam here, but I'm going with his confidant in Michael's answer, Mr. Robert B. Anderson.
His only was not B.
I know. We were talking about Lyndon B. Johnson earlier today, and I wanted to include the B there.
Earlier
it's
today,
fun.
as in 10 seconds ago.
Well, 10 seconds ago. Because, F. Scott Fitzgerald, it's just fun to say initials when it's a part of a name. No,
We were watching Ted 2 the other day. F.
Lyndon
Scott
B.
Fitzgerald. What does Scott
Johnson.
Fitzgerald ever do to you?
Your name is Sam L. Jackson? All right. Well, my Robert Ory Award is Robbie Anderson. The same name. Basically, he was useless before the playoffs, week 1 through 13. Yeah, he put up double-digit points one time. People drafted him to be useful. He was the complete opposite. And then he was a waiver wire pickup during the playoffs and put up 16, 19, and 25, thanks a lot to Sam Darnold's improved play in the last 4 weeks, his true throw value at BrotoFF.com, also BrotoFantasy.com. Holla at your boy. Number 5 in the final 4 weeks in true throw value, while on the season he was number 20-something. Can't find his name here, but 20-something. It's really pissing me off. 25. So we went from 25 to 5, jumped 20 points in true throw value when you look at the full season compared to the final 4 weeks. It had a lot to do with what Robbie Anderson was able to do when he was seeing those targets. 16, 19, and 25 points in those games. Robbie Anderson's clutch Magoo.
My man is Doug Baldwin. And Doug Baldwin, if you drafted him this year, you probably drafted him in the 3rd, 4th round. And he probably shit your team for a long time. But when you needed him most, he came through. Doug Baldwin has always been a second-half player. First in the first round of the playoffs, 22 yards of receiving, not great, but he did score a touchdown, which saved it. He saved his best for last. 77 yards and 2 touchdowns against San Francisco in the semifinals, and then in the final, 126 yards, his season high, and 1 touchdown. He had his highest fantasy output when it was time to have your highest fantasy output. So, Mr. Dougie B, thank you for that. Thank you
Dougie
also.
Fresh.
For those of you who know, I sat Doug Baldwin and lost the championship because of it.
We know. Now that's all well and dandy. But my Robert Horry Award goes to Jalen Samuels of the
Nice.
Pittsburgh
I thought you were going
Steelers.
to put a cool,
Jalen Samuels is a cool one.
No, I'm just disappointed. I thought he had a cool rhyme coming together when he said cool and dandy. I thought he was going to come out with some straight fire.
Jalen Samuels was sure handy in the playoffs. He was basically useless the first 12 weeks of the year with James Conner controlling the backfield, and then comes Jalen Samuels when Conner goes down. And he did his thing for all 3 weeks of the fantasy championship. Week 14, he had 7 receptions. Week 15, 140 rushing yards. Week 16, he scored his first touchdown. He put up double-digit points every single week. Many championship-winning teams had Jalen Samuels on their roster, either as a James Conner / Le'Veon Bell handcuff, or just straight up picking him up and robbing him from someone else going into the playoffs. And it was great and dandy
Here's my
and very handy.
The Robert Horry Award goes to someone who was not very good and then came clutch. Jalen Samuels wasn't not good. He just wasn't playing.
Which makes him not good.
Not necessarily.
Absolutely, Sarah Lee.
We picked guys who people drafted to produce, and
Well,
they didn't.
I think that, yes, you would be right, but I think that the fact that Jalen Samuels was a tight end, puts him in the running for this award.
True.
That doesn't mean anything.
In Yahoo leagues only, though.
I don't see the...
Correlation?
I don't see
Is that the word you're looking for?
No, it has nothing to do with correlation.
You're looking for correlation.
It's not correlation.
Yes, it is.
I don't know.
Yep.
Nope.
Correlize me, Captain.
I don't see
Talk, bro.
I don't see the relevance of
Talk.
his tight end eligibility. What do you mean talk? I already said Robbie Anderson.
Oh, damn it.
What
I'm
the
not.
fuck is up
You're
with
a
you?
mess.
It's too much. Honestly, guys, for behind the scenes, we're an independent podcast. We're gonna let you in behind the curtain. We got our main man here, Yanni. He's doing some camera work. So in between some of these things, we got to press pause because, we're an independent operation and move the camera. And this pause thing is messing me up. We usually don't
The pause didn't do anything right
Didn't do
now
anything.
for this.
I know, but it's messing me up in
Segment.
general.
Tim's just using this little monologue to try
crying
to get
out
back
loud.
on track.
For
And this
crying out
monologue
loud.
was pointless, and everything he's doing is pointless.
We got 2 awards
Get it
left.
together, Tim.
Let's move on.
You guys are mean. Oh,
Canada.
Romeo, oh, Romeo.
Pull down
Where
your
art
own
thou, Romeo? The next one is the Shakespearean Tragedy Award. A guy whose time came too early. And greatness turned to ash.
Goodbye, my lord.
Let's start with Jason. Jason, who wins your Shakespearean Tragedy Award? The player who got injured before his time.
This is the answer right here.
No,
This
it's
is
not.
this
I
is
have
the
the
Romeo
answer.
and Juliet.
I have the answer to
I
this
have
one.
This
That's
is
what
the
I'm
Romeo and Juliet love story.
saying. Every time we're all just like, yo, I got the answer. No,
Okay.
I got the answer.
Said fantasy player, Romeo, meets said fantasy football player, Juliet. So we have said player. We have James Conner. Romeo, Juliet. Juliet is James Conner. For these purposes, falls in love. He finds his waiver pickup. He finds his last pick of the draft. He finds his player that will bring him to victory every single week. Be a running back 1. Ended as a running back 6, I think you said earlier. Right?
Wait, the
And then-
answer is James Conner?
James Conner.
What kind of weird-ass thing was that?
What
I
on God's green earth are you talking about?
like, you were saying Juliet. I was waiting for you to say who Romeo was as the answer.
No,
Some stupid
Romeo
ass shit.
is fantasy football player. Juliet is James Conner. Romeo meets Juliet. They fall in love for 13 weeks. They think that they're going to get married and be a great couple and join their families and win a lot of money together, right?
Idiot said fantasy football player, said fantasy football player. As a human being and as
okay,
an NFL
I fucked
player.
that up then. Fine. They fall in love. 13 weeks later, they think they're going to get married, but then their parents don't approve. And James Conner goes and gets injured because he's very distraught.
I'm gonna tell you what, James Conner, like, besides the terrible analogy, James Conner went from a guy that brought teams that had no business being in playoff contention to playoff contention and just ruined teams.
That's what I'm saying.
And I'm gonna tell you one thing that I learned from this year, and we're gonna have an episode talking about what we learned from this year. Nothing is safe because Michael's team in our money league was probably the best team ever assembled. Yep. This guy was putting like 180 points, half PPR per week, and I'm not even being hyperbolic. Like, I promise you, he was putting up 180. Everyone in our league was just like, how are we going to beat Michael? And then all of a sudden he loses in his only playoff game because of things like James Conner getting injured, because of things like Rob Gronkowski almost shitting the bed, because of things...
Well, I didn't have Gronk, but...
Oh, who'd you have?
Adam Thielen.
Adam Thielen all of a sudden becoming terrible. A whole bunch of guys. Michael doesn't want to go through this again. But I learned that. Another thing I learned is don't fall in love with a player because you might get your heart broken. My love of my life was Cooper Kupp. Me and Michael put a bet in that Cooper Kupp was going to be fantastic this year, and I think...
Well, our bet was Kupp versus Woods, so I won the bet.
Right. I mean, yeah, sure, you won the bet. But, I mean, if you're looking at just raw, like, talent and raw ability, I think Cooper Kupp really surprised. And I think that if you were not familiar with Cooper Kupp and the fact that he's 6'2" and the fact that he's a super athlete, you kind of just got lost in the narrative that he was a small white slot receiver who just did work in the middle of the field and just did... No, this guy is a genuine number one type guy. He is a tall red zone target, and he scored 6 touchdowns in the 6 games that he played full games. He had 566 yards total. He was on pace to be a wide receiver 1 and kill it for the remainder of the year. Cooper Kupp, you went too early, and it was again. I had Cooper Kupp stock in almost all of my teams, and it really hurt. So, Cooper Kupp is the Shakespearean tragedy of the year.
Cool. Well, not correct, although it was cool. My guy is AJ Green. So AJ Green, he was a stud as always. There he goes. Jason picked up the AJ Green weird thing that Tim bought for the studio. It's just a flat head.
How weird?
It's not a fat head. It's a flat head. But yeah, so we got AJ Green, who put up double-digit points every week except for one. The first 8 weeks of the year was doing superstar things per usual, as AJ Green does. And then he got hurt, and it wasn't an injury where you could just put him on the IR. It was an injury you're like, yeah, he'll come back, don't worry. But it just kept delaying until week 13 when he finally did come back, and you're like, yes, AJ Green is back. You put him in your starting lineup, he gets you 1.2, leaves, and then is actually out the year a week later.
That actually happened to me too.
And AJ Green is not someone that you could replace, especially when he goes down in week 9. Like, you couldn't pick up someone like Tyler Boyd, who was good in the beginning of the year. Wide receivers were scarce on the waiver wire this year, really. Someone like Chris Godwin, who let people down in the playoffs, besides championship week. So you really couldn't replace AJ Green, and AJ Green went down and tore up a lot of fantasy teams.
Yeah, and he was really productive. Like, he was super productive. That team was so bad that people forget how productive and how good AJ Green is. And our last one.
He had just under 700 receiving yards in 8 games. You hear that?
The waiver.
Thinking of better times in the summer.
Rider of the week, someone who you picked up on waivers, and you are thanking the good Lord because
of the year. You said of the week.
Of the year, yes. That you picked him up because he did work for you.
After week 6, though, is the
after week 6. After week 6. So my guy, I'm going to start right away, is Damian Williams. When Kareem Hunt left the league for the reasons why he left, it left people in a quandary. Who do I pick up? Spencer Ware was the guy that everyone went out in. As soon as it was tweeted on BRoto, I went and I picked up Spencer Ware in every single one of my leagues. But on BRoto, we told you, pick up Damian Williams as a speculative ad. Spencer Ware not only has much less talent than Kareem Hunt, but he's also injury prone in his career. And that's exactly what happened. He got injured. Damian Williams came through, and in the playoffs, came through big time for you. Against the Chargers, he put up 2 touchdowns. Against the Seahawks, he put up a receiving touchdown and 103 yards rushing. Against the Raiders, he put up a touchdown and 51 yards rushing. This is a guy who continuously produced for you out of the backfield. He even produced a touchdown against Baltimore on December 9th. That was a matchup, 2 touchdowns, 1 receiving, 1 rushing, a matchup that you were not. If you're any running back against Baltimore this year, you're expecting to do bad, especially a backup. And then he came in, he produced 2 touchdowns in 2 weeks in a row against hard teams. The championship schedule for him was Baltimore, the Chargers, and Seattle. That is not easy. And he put up at least 2 touchdowns or 100 yards and a touchdown in all the games. Damian Williams is my waiver wire of the year.
Well, we're talking after week 6, Tim. Damian Williams was good for 3 weeks.
Boom, roasted.
Yes,
then,
but if you're that good where you get either 2 touchdowns or you get 100 yards and a touchdown in all 3 weeks of the championship, I'm sorry, it's value.
Which is why I have the answer in front of me. It's Derrick Henry,
Okay,
the number 1 overall fantasy player throughout the fantasy
Hold
playoffs.
on.
fine.
Hold on. No.
That's the answer.
No.
That's the answer.
How do you argue it was only 3 weeks, Tim? And then you come out with someone who's good for 3 weeks.
Because he had double-digit fantasy points in 7 of the 9 weeks after week 6.
And he had the game of the year. Let's not forget. He put up 50 points. Right?
But nobody cared about him scoring double digits until week 14.
But he was. If you picked him up after week 6, he was solid for you.
And we know a guy who picked him up and played him on all 3 of those weeks and won the championship. We know a guy.
Yeah, we do.
He won our money league.
Fuck that guy. So, I mean, it's clearly Derrick Henry, man. How do you...
You want my answer?
Where did Derrick Henry finish in terms of running backs? Do you have that number?
Like in the running back 2 range.
Running back 2 range.
He ended as like running back 15 or something.
After being the joke of the season, he finished as a running back 2.
All right, you know who
Dude,
my
he
waiver
ended
pickup
with
is?
1,000 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns.
That's insane.
You know who was great after week 6? Marlon Mack.
That's true.
And let me tell you why. Let me tell you
Marlon Mack is better than Derrick Henry
Let me
as a
tell
fantasy
you-
pickup.
why.
The number 1 overall player in the fantasy playoffs.
Let me tell you why. I like Marlon Mack after week 6, right?
This is
After
dumb.
week 6 is when he came back and started being a great running back. I'm talking about the 3 games where he wasn't good. I'm talking about the 2 against Houston and the 2 against Jacksonville and the 1 against Houston. What did all of those games have in common?
He sucked it up for your fantasy team.
They were also bad matchups where we said don't trust Marlon Mack this week.
And
My point being, Marlon Mack, outside of those games, averaged 19 points a game. So, Marlon Mack, you were able to pick up. Listen, hear me out. Marlon Mack, you were able to pick up. You knew what he was going to do bad. You were able to bench him and start someone else. And then when he wasn't playing against the hard competition, he put up 19 points a game. Marlon Mack, you picked him up week 6. He put up 19 points a game for you. And the 3 weeks where he wasn't reliable, he wasn't even in your lineup because there were bad matchups.
Marlon Mack was a great pickup off the waiver wire.
Yo,
But
Jason.
your reasoning,
Jason, you're like Bill O'Reilly right now.
it's like the worst reasoning ever.
Just spinning everything. Jason, you just said.
The no spin zone.
You just said.
You
He was
highlighted his bad weeks.
He was great,
Exactly.
except for the times he wasn't.
Exactly. That's the point. They were predictive. You didn't start him. He never messed you up.
We're done here.
We're done.
He was on your bench when in those tough games. A lot of people who picked up Marlon Mack had other players.
Did you guys hear that fart? Anyway,
Fuck.
I just farted OD long.
Oh, no. There goes the Colts
I don't know what
banner.
stinks more, my fart or Jason's takes. What are you doing?
The banner fell, bro.
It's the playoff matchups.
In the middle of the episode, you
There's
just,
like 2 minutes left and the banner's
We
full.
can't ruin the integrity of the show. Those are the playoff matchups up there. They need to hold strong.
you're right. So let's just continue recording as we fix it. Although we could press pause.
Exactly.
That'll be good for the integrity of the show.
If you believe in superstition, the Colts just went down.
Michael's the one that yelled it out.
Although Colts one just went down.
Oh.
Ooh.
But the Texans were loose.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.